Hi there, and welcome to Lawrence Dallaglio's Lions podcast with my special guest, Ben Kay.
All right, Laurel, how are we? Just pouring you a pint of London Pride.
An outstanding pint, if I might say so, and the official beer of the British and Irish Lions, which is what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, and it takes skill.
Right, that probably rules me out then.
Dedication.
Indeed.
Dedication, lol.
Indeed.
And time.
Yes, it takes all of those things to get into the Lions squad.
Oh, actually, I was talking about the skill, dedication and time that goes into brewing an ale like London Pride. There you go, mate.
Oh, absolutely. But it's the same if you want to be a Lion and to play with pride. Thank you very much.
We've got our pints, lol. We're all set for the match.
And this podcast in partnership with London Pride, the official beer of the British and Irish Lions. Cheers.
Cheers.
And remember, please drink responsibly. Hello and welcome to Lawrence Dallaglio's Lions podcast. Feeling a little bit stuck out here on my own this week, coming from the Minories pub in London. Although my sat-nav must have sent me somewhere completely different because I'm in County Donegal in a place called Rathmullen in Ireland. But as it is the British and Irish Lions, I'm doing my bit for Irish rugby. But luckily, my special guests have all found the right way to the Minories. So hello to Ben Kay, and from the Evening Standard, the world's most hardest working sports correspondent, it is, of course, Will McPherson. Hello, gents. Good evening to you both.
Lol. Nice of you to turn up.
to my own podcast. And of course, I'm delighted, as I can see Tommy's there, to welcome you to one of Scotland's top try scorers and a man who represented the British and Irish Lions on tour in New Zealand in 2017. It is, of course, Tommy Seymour. Tommy, good evening to you too.
Hello, Lawrence. Thank you very much for having me on.
Pleasure. I can see you've all got pints in hand, so enjoying that. And Tommy, I must ask you while you're there, you've obviously been keeping an eye, hopefully, on the Lions tour so far. I remember from your own days, I think you were one of two Scots that went out to New Zealand. There's obviously an enormous Scottish contingent of players this time around. What's been your first impressions? Obviously, the Wingers have got off to a flying start, but I take it you've been watching it with interest.
Yes, I have indeed. It's great to see the amount of Scottish guys on this tour. I was one of three that went on the original one before we were joined by the two that came across as part of the six. But yeah, look, the Scottish boys, I think personally, from a Scottish perspective, I think they've done incredibly well. As have the rest of the guys on the tour. To be fair, I think it's been alluded to already on a number of occasions from various sources that there hasn't really been a player on that tour that's really put a foot wrong thus far. Certainly the same goes for all the Scottish guys. They've all put their hand up incredibly well, and from a winger's perspective, I think every one of them seems to be firing. I think 8 tries from Josh Adams in 3 games is absolutely ridiculous, and the others aren't far behind. So, yeah, very interesting viewing coming into the test next week.
And listen, we asked Ben and our previous guests, that experience of putting on the Lions jersey. You obviously did that in New Zealand, probably one of the toughest tours the Lions have ever been on. Can you just give us all the live audience there and our listeners just a little bit of a recollection of what that feeling was like for you to be selected, but also to pull on that jersey in New Zealand for the first time?
Yeah, it's a very surreal experience. Obviously, there's a lot of emphasis that gets put around the selection day, and when you speak to your friends and family, they very much think you might have as a player an indication or an idea that you might be involved, but it really does. There's no inclination whatsoever that your name might come out of the hat. And for me, it was a very special day. It's a boyhood dream of every rugby player, and to go on a tour that is something that is somewhat of a childhood, a dream. It's a fantasy. It's something you never really think could be possible. So when it happens, it's a really special and surreal moment. And then, it's been said before by many players in the past, when you see a Lions jersey on the peg in the changing room, knowing that you're about to, put it on for the first time, it's very special. It pulls something deep within you that you never thought was possible. And to look around a changing room and taking the faces and names of all the various countries that are represented in the Lions, players that you've had such fierce competition with over the years, to know that you're all coming together as one, about to enter a field and play against a different opposition together is very, very special.
Look, we know that the guys have had some real challenges on this tour, particularly in terms of trying to sort of emulate previous Lions tours in terms of the camaraderie, etc. It's very difficult for them. I believe they're in single rooms. We had, as one of our guests on a previous podcast, we had Jonathan Joseph, who joined us in the second podcast we did. I believe that you actually roomed with him in New Zealand. Can you dish the dirt on JJ?
I did. JJ was
he a good roommate? Was he a difficult roommate?
No, listen, I'll keep it all polite. JJ was a great roommate. JJ actually was my very first roommate. I walked into the Vale for our first week, and JJ was there. I think Anthony Watson wasn't far behind. I think those two are never far behind each other. No, JJ was a great guy. Look, I was a very shy, lonely Scotsman walking into that room, and yeah, JJ had a nice warm welcome for me, and we got on well. We were on the watt bikes every morning at 7 a.m., so that kind of bonded the two of us together quite closely. But no, a great fella, and yeah, very good roommate.
Listen, I know that you're very close to some of the Scots guys who are out there at the moment. Obviously, Finn Russell, you would have played an enormous amount with. Hamish Watson, probably one or two others. Have you been in touch with any of them? Have they been in touch with you, or have you just sort of left them to their own devices?
Yeah, I think for the most part, you just kind of leave them to their own devices. I can only imagine that they get inundated with messages from family and friends, and you certainly don't want to burden them too much with having to feel like they have to respond to you. But yeah, I've been in contact. I've sent a couple of messages across to the boys when they've been selected and doing really well. Particularly the Glasgow boys and Ali Price and Xander getting to experience their first tour. So, I fire the odd message across just to see how everything's going and make sure that they know everyone back home's cheering them on.
And from your own point of view, look, Ben and I were very much involved from a broadcast perspective for that wonderful tour that you were on in New Zealand. It was an amazing experience, an incredible result. Whilst you didn't necessarily, you weren't picked in the test side. You had obviously you had a huge impact. I was about to say on the trip itself. You scored a lot of tries. You played in the games, certainly in the lead up to that test series. If you could pull out one or two highlights for you individually, other than just being part of a successful Lions tour, what would they have been?
Yeah, obviously scoring tries as a winger is a great thing, and I remember crossing the whitewash for my first try. It was an incredibly special moment. I think Josh Adams has scored the same amount of tries I did in about 6 minutes since his first game. So yeah, it's somewhat dulled down that for me. But I suppose the other things is JJ rightly alluded to it last week on the podcast he did, which was the cultural embrace in New Zealand, getting to experience their culture out there, the way they view rugby. It's such a part and parcel with their day-to-day life out there. The welcoming ceremony for one was a real highlight for me, and then the second one being the first game we played. I mentioned previously about seeing the shirt on the peg in the changing room, but that experience when you pull it over, you get a team talk from a captain that you're used to hearing from a different voice, but you're hearing from a new captain for the first time, and you're all running out together onto the field. And I remember there was fans, and it wasn't just I can't remember the name of the stadium, but it wasn't a clear-cut stadium in regards to all seated all around. There was people sitting on hills and various parts around, and it was a very surreal moment. Just this sea of red on one side, and then this just embrace from New Zealand that were so keen to come and watch and play a part in this tour. So from a cultural aspect, I think it was a very, very special thing to experience.
Benny, for you, obviously we've been following the warm-up games, but it does feel like the tour has gone up another level in the lead up to this game against South Africa, and obviously the match itself. Do you get that sense yourself too?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think the game last night was the best thing that could have happened for both teams, because obviously South Africa picked the side they did because they're short of match practice. They haven't played together apart from Georgia since the World Cup final in 2019, and they looked really, really good when they came out. But equally, the Lions have been playing a non-test match brand of rugby, and it hasn't been the same sort of intensity they'll face against the Boks, and I actually think Warren Gatland might feel slightly happier than Rassie Erasmus with how it went. Funnily enough, even though they lost, we know that it's very difficult to win back-to-back Lions Test Series games, so they've now lost one, but it doesn't count in the final reckoning. But I just think They didn't show their hand, the Lions, yesterday. I think they kept a lot in reserve. If you look at how they attacked when they had opportunities close to the line, and me and Tommy were talking before we went on air about, particularly when they were down, the South Africans, to 13 men, the opportunity was to go wide, but the Lions didn't take it. Now, is that because that they weren't capable of taking it and they didn't look up, or is it because they didn't want to show some of the movements that could have got them into those wide channels? I think the Lions' only hope against South Africa is to move that defence around and play in different areas and get them never comfortable thinking they know where the attack's going to come from. And I think, we will see in the Test match, very different scenario, but the Lions now will be under no illusion about how hard it's going to be, the physicality of it. And it absolutely, Lol. It was a step up, and it got. The worry was we had that game, and everyone thought, a bit of a damp squib. It wasn't, was it? It was a fantastic start, little taster of what's to come, and we all know this is going to be one hell of a series.
And Will, obviously everyone has branded that game as the sort of unofficial fourth test. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the match itself. Clearly. A massive step up physically for the Lions. They've all admitted that as much. They probably gave themselves a lot to do in that first half. They obviously went 10-0 down. Who do you think comes out on top psychologically from that performance? Because I know that I've sort of read the reports from both camps, and everyone's spinning it in their favour. That the box are saying it's exactly what they needed. Gatland saying, look, ignore the result. We got enough lessons out of it, etc., etc. But I think there's some really strong lessons for the Lions to take on board, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. But both sides are facing being pretty undercooked in this series. South Africa have their second test against Georgia cancelled, but even their first test against Georgia was not, it's nowhere near what they're going to face against the Lions. The Lions played Japan and then three provincial sides. It was, two provincial sides, won twice. And those games were pretty, as Ben said, they weren't test matches by any stretch. The rugby was totally different to what we're going to see at Cape Town Stadium a week on Saturday. So the Lions really needed that game. And the Boks, I'm calling them the Boks, Springbok A, South Africa A, yesterday came out and they were quicker to reach test match intensity, which is pretty incredible when you consider that they haven't played together for 20 months apart from that game against Georgia, and actually the fact that they've all been in their hotel rooms for a week. But they managed to hit that level. But we also saw them tire massively in the second half. There's no getting away from the fact that while the Lions couldn't get over the line yesterday, they didn't win the game. They sort of were banging at that door. They had much the better of the second half. And I think the Lions will be happy. I thought their bench had a big impact. I thought a few players went a long way to getting in that test team. Wynne Jones obviously scored their try, but Tom Curry was another. Maro Itoje was going to play the first test anyway, but he was outstanding. So I think Warren Gatland will be really encouraged by that performance and very happy that the Lions have had that game.
Benny, just focusing on a couple of the sort of real key areas of the game. The breakdown at times, it felt like the Lions were on the back foot. Conor Murray having to really dig in there. The box came with a lot more ferocity than perhaps the Lions have been used to. I don't know whether it was just myself or a lot of people looking at the kicking game clearly of de Klerk at 9 and staying at 10 just seemed to be that little bit more accurate than the Lions. So I'm sure that's a couple of areas in particular that they'll focus on.
Well, Will was talking about the intensity, and how remarkable it was for South Africa. I think that comes from the kicking game. You look at the game that they played, it was very like Faf de Klerk when he's wearing a sail shirt, wasn't it? In those first few minutes, dominating and almost giving the ball back to the opposition and say, we're going to dominate you by tackling you and making you break down a mess. And the Lions are under a bit of pressure to back up some of their performances with their attacking rugby. So South Africa are the masters at controlling the tempo of a game, and they did that to England in the World Cup final. And very similar performance last night, just being able to slow everything down, suppress a team that wants to attack, but then when they get an opportunity, they light the touch paper and they're gone. And really, very similar to the World Cup final, just a couple of moments and suddenly South Africa are 2 scores ahead, and you're thinking, how did that happen? We've had all the ball, where's it come from? And I think the breakdown's going to be absolutely key, but you're right, because a lot of the pundits last night were saying don't kick to Cheslin Colby. Actually, you don't want to kick to Cheslin Colby, but you want to make sure that he's got no grass in front of him to run into, because then you've got the best player on the floor at the bottom of a ruck, and he's not able to run in the wide open expanses out wide. So kick to him, but the accuracy for the Lions was really poor early on.
Yeah, and Tommy, just talk about Cheslin Colby. Give us an idea about how you go about stopping a player of his ability, because whether it's in a Toulouse jersey or a Springbok jersey, he's made a lot of players look very ordinary in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, he's why I retired from professional rugby, is the fear of facing him in a Toulouse shirt. I actually just read recently that I think Glasgow could potentially be pulled with Toulouse in next year's European competition. So I think, thank goodness for that. Even the mere threat of that would have had me with night sweats. But yeah, look, he's a phenomenal winger. He's done it repeatedly over the last number of years on the world stage, club stage. He steps a man in a phone box. You look at what he did last night, and I think Ben's alluded to already. There should be no fear in kicking at all down his wing. It's just about the right type of kick and making sure that the pressure on him when that ball's coming down is good, because, you know, for all his amazing attributes, you know, his stature-wise, he can be at someone that can be targeted under the high ball, and the Lions have got, you know, a lot of capable guys in that area. So if we kick right on him and don't give him the opportunity to collect and then run back at you, you know, he can definitely be exposed there. But as we've just seen last night, if we get into a kicking battle whereby one long kick goes a little bit too awry, it gets in his hands, you know, he's devastating, and he showed that last night with how he set up the try. So he's certainly a winger to watch, and he's so exciting, and, you know, to watch. And I think everyone that he's in picking up rugby on a casual basis can look at him and think, what a player.
And Tommy, from a winger's perspective, who's been vying for a Test jersey yourself on a Lions tour, obviously, I mean, I think every winger that's played so far has played brilliantly, haven't they, really? You know, Josh Adams obviously gone really well. Van der Merwe's done, you know, fantastically well as well. Louis Rees-Zammit nearly scored last night, but he's been pushing without putting your neck on the block. I mean, it's going to be very, very tough selection, isn't it, for the for Warren Gatland and co, and probably going to go right to the wire.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I would honestly hate to be in those selection meetings, you know, across the board, but certainly in the back three. I
think the fact that Josh Adams has actually watched his wife give birth over Zoom as well, that probably just nudges him over the edge.
I was about to say, that shows a level of commitment that maybe has pushed him across the line. But look, he's, you know, the fact that he's nearly in double digits, you know, already is absolutely ridiculous. I know Douan's not far behind. I think you've rightly pointed out the fact that I don't think any of them have put a foot wrong. You know, I'm a massive fan of Anthony Watson. I think he just shows Test credentials whenever he plays. I think he was brilliant again last night with the limited amount of ball that we'd like to see realistically in his hands. You know, Douan and Josh have been scoring tries for fun, albeit maybe the competition, they'll argue, hasn't been quite as high for them thus far. But, you know, in the back three, they're all so capable of filling that Test spot. And realistically, what you want from a coach perspective is for all of them to be in that mind frame, to be playing at that peak level, which they all are. So, you know, very, very difficult. My head on the line, I honestly don't know who I'd be picking, unfortunately.
Lawrence, one thing that we always bring up around wingers selection, and we've seen it, you know, we saw it with Christian Wade, and do you go with what they can do or what they can't do? Because, you know, playing against South Africa in particular, you've got Faf de Klerk's kicking game. You need someone that's pretty good under the high ball. Can they mark Cheslin Colby? But actually, or do you want someone like Van der Merwe who can do something that no one else on that tour can do and run through people?
Well, this is what I was thinking in my own head, you know, on the plane down was, you know, where do you apply, you know, the right traits to go against someone, for example, like Cheslin Colby? You know you're going to be facing a massive kicking game. So someone like, you know, it feels terrible to say it because the wingers themselves are playing so well in the tour, but you can see a little bit of legitimacy in saying, well, Liam Williams can fill a spot on the wing because, you know, for my money, Hoggy is an unbelievable player at 15. You've got to find someone with that electricity at him, you know, a place on the park. But Liam is so good at what he does. He's so consistent under the high ball. You could say, well, the way South Africa are going to attack us, let's put someone like that in the wing spot. Having said that, you can put a Duan van der Merwe, and from sheer size difference, that Duan does that with the biggest of guys opposite him, let alone maybe potentially one of the smallest. You give him 5 meters of space to work with, and he's probably going to go over the top of you. I think they've got an embarrassment of riches at the moment with the Lions and the way their wingers are playing, and I think any one of them right now going into the test will do a very good job.
It's a really interesting question you mentioned there, Ben, because does Warren Gatland neutralise South Africa's strengths, or does he actually go after South Africa in a slightly different way? And if you look at the way that the All Blacks beat South Africa in the World Cup in the opening round, in the opening match, it was actually the kicking game that actually undid South Africa themselves. Benny, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Lions' game management, particularly in that second half when they were on top and the Springboks were down to 13 men. They were trying to go through the middle of the box, weren't they, and pick and go and sort of batter them up front when possibly shipping the ball out wide may have been the right option. I'm sure there was a few wingers there screaming for the ball out wide. Do you think that was a case of just the Lions holding back a little bit and not wanting to show their hand completely, or do you think it was just a little bit of naivety on the night?
To me, it's one of two things. It's either that they're holding back and they don't want to show their hand, and potentially among the forwards that's the case, because I can't believe the forwards think that that's the best way to get over the line, particularly when you're 5 meters out. They were just a slight bit of variation, a slight bit of movement would have changed the picture, and all you're trying to do there when you're 5 out is make someone in the defensive line have a hesitation or make a slight error, and then you're over the line. But you need to move them around. It was so comfortable for the box, and you almost feed the beast by doing that. The key for me is the halfbacks, and they should be controlling that, because the forwards they're doing what they do, but as soon as they can't see where the defensive line's got narrow, that has to come from Owen Farrell. Now, is that a Warren Gatland in Owen Farrell's ear? But for me, if Dan Biggar had been there, or Marcus Smith had been there, or Finn Russell had been there, I think they would have played wider. And I think someone that made themselves harder to pick for the Test series, despite Ronan O'Gara saying he should be the Test 10, is Owen Farrell at 10. I'm not saying they won't play him elsewhere, but I think against the box, you've got to have someone with that vision and that want to move that South African team around. So for me, it might not be popular with the man sitting alongside me, but I'd go for Dan Biggar, because I think he's got that good balance of both.
Well, listen, we'll get on to this selection, particularly against the Stormers later on in the pod. But obviously it's the time where you take control of proceedings, and it's the time where Ben and I sort of cower into the background, because it's the drop kick challenge.
Indeed, Lawrence, time for Dropkick Challenge. We've done this 3 weeks in a row now. If you remember, Lawrence, you're currently leading 12-6. It's Dropkick, so
somehow, yes.
It's 3 points for every correct answer. Let's see how you do with this week's challenge. I've got 3 questions for you this week, so you've got a bit of a chance to close the gap, Ben. The first question is, the Lions have played 651 games in their history. I'm not going to ask you to name them all or tell me exactly what result happened in each of them, but I need you to tell me how many of those 651 matches the Lions have won. Lawrence, as you haven't turned up,
yeah, you can go first.
I think you should go first here.
Well, I've got a rough idea. I've got no idea how many they've won, but I know that they've lost about 47% of the games. They've drawn, I don't know, I'd say maybe about another 5%. So
this is all games, Lawrence, not just test matches.
Okay, all games.
Hang on, don't help him out. Don't help him out.
So the total number is how many? 600.
Show me your hands, Lawrence. I think you got a phone under the screen.
No. 651 games in total, right? So I've got to guess how many, and then Ben's going to go higher or lower than my answer, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say 575.
Ooh,
they've won 575.
That's a lot. What was the total number again?
651.
Well, that's quite high.
That's quite high.
I'm going to what did you say, Lol? 6?
I said 575.
575. I'm going to go 520.
The answer is 488. So Ben takes for 3 points. He slots for drop kick there. if you're interested, they've also drawn 32 times and they've lost 171 games. So Ben takes 3 points there.
12-9. It's close.
Well done, Benny. Well done. It's closing in.
On to question 2. One of the most successful tours to South Africa was in 1974. This particular Lions team became the only one to go on an entire tour undefeated. They won 21 of the 22 games with one draw. What was the nickname of that side?
Ooh.
Do you want to go first, Ben? You look like you know.
Do we write it down, or I do know it? Do we write it down? I'll tell you what, Lawrence, you write it down, what you think it is, and then hold it up to the camera, and I'll say before you hold it up.
Okay. I think it is, if I've got no idea what it's called, but I'm going to go with...
The flower pots. The flower pots.
I'll say it's the Invincibles. How about that?
Well, that doesn't work, does it? Yeah, I said it was the Invincibles as well.
You're both right.
Well,
it's correct, Lawrence. Well done.
I mean, they're unlike Arsenal, they're the proper Invincibles, aren't they, really? Let's be honest.
So
well done, Benny. I knew you knew that.
You can both take your 3 points from that one. So what are we 15-9 now?
12.
15-12. Okay, the final question of tonight's Dropkick Challenges. After winning the first 2 tests on that tour, the Lions took on the Springboks in what was later dubbed the Battle of Bert Erasmus Stadium in Port Elizabeth. During the second half of that game, an unusual occurrence temporarily halted play. What happened? This is kind of question of sport vibes now, isn't it? What?
I know this.
Ben knows.
Do you?
What happened next? Well, what happened next? I think I do, yeah.
Is it?
He doesn't know the answer, I don't reckon.
Your broadband connection not too good.
Well, I mean, other than the 99 call, that's the only thing I can think of.
It might have been the 99 call, but...
See, I thought it was the 99 call, which basically signalled a mass brawl, which would have been perfect, to be honest with you.
I think during said mass brawl, one of the South African players' eyes might have fallen out. I think is that the glass eye one?
That is the glass eye incident. So Ben takes our 3 points here. That's absolutely outstanding rugby knowledge.
Have you been leaving those answers just lying there for Ben to have a little look at? Cause
you got to know your Lions history, mate. You got to know.
He's a student of the game. I'll tell you the full story. Gordon Brown, the Lions lock, clipped Johan De Bruyne in a tackle, and with that, out came De Bruyne's glass eye. Players on both sides and the officials went down on hands and knees looking for the eye. They found it, and the game continued.
He put it back in.
He put it back in. They carried on.
Well,
done, Ben.
Congratulations. What does that leave us level? Is it now on
level
points?
begging? 15 all. 15 all.
Perfectly poised.
Well, listen, well done. Thanks for that, Will. And let's take a look at the latest news from South Africa with the team, which has now been announced to take on the DHL Stormers. Will, I look no further than your wonderful knowledge. You must have spoken to the Lions camp. What's the kind of latest news coming out of that camp? I suppose it's all about the return of the skipper, Alan Wynne-Jones, is it not?
It is indeed. It's a truly incredible story, actually. It's only when he's on the bench against the Stormers on Saturday. That's only 3 weeks after he was officially ruled out of the tour with a dislocated shoulder. It's an injury that would normally... it would rule mere mortals out for much longer than 3 weeks, but Alan Wynne-Jones is not a mere mortal when it comes to Lions tours. He's back out there. Warren Gatland said last night that he wouldn't be able to train till Monday.
Flew in overnight without a plane. just flew.
Hey Ben, can you explain to me and explain to all of our live audience there how a rugby player, albeit an amazing player in Alan Wynne-Jones, can dislocate his shoulder against Japan, and then less than 3 weeks later he'd be back out on the aeroplane and join the Lions. I mean, this is an extraordinary man with extraordinary powers of recovery, right?
Yeah, look. He is unbelievably so, and really important to the Lions as well. Just that psychological lift of having someone like him walk back into camp, say, "All right, lads, I'm back." It would just give everyone a huge boost, because they all will have been gutted when he went. But that there are. I mean, I thought that it was quite interesting how quickly they sort of ruled him out of the tour without actually having gone through all the scans. And they said that when they had a look at him, it wasn't quite as bad as they'd feared, and perhaps it hadn't fully gone out, but it was subluxed, and then they still needed a bit of putting back in. But I think they also have said there's things that they can try that perhaps if he was a 21-year-old at the beginning of his career, they wouldn't be doing, but it doesn't have to last with the same sort of impacts for quite as long. And I certainly, towards the end of my career, I had to change, the last 6 weeks, I had to change the way I lifted in the line out because my thumb, I'd torn the ligaments in my thumb, but I wasn't going to retire because of the ligaments in my thumb, so I just left it. And actually, as a result, when I got round to seeing the doctor, he went, well, if you'd seen me 6 weeks ago, there was something I could have done about it, but there's not now. So when you get to the end of your career, your body and how it behaves for the next sort of 20 isn't at the forefront of your mind. But the worry for us all is that how does it affect him mentally? We know how strong a character he is, and we know what an absolute ultimate professional he is, but he's tried it out in training. He hasn't had it in the heat of a test match yet. And we don't know whether... Because remember, he's obviously missed all that time warm-up games. Yeah. He's missed... his season finished earlier than some of the players on the tour anyway, so match fitness won't be quite what it should be. So can you risk having him on the bench for a test match, for the first test at least, knowing that if you bring him on, what happens if the worst happens and it's not quite right? So do you have to start him and then have a Courtney Laws on the bench or a Tyke Byrne on the bench? I don't know. I don't know the answer to it. So that's something that I guess the few minutes that he gets off the bench this weekend will tell us. But what an unbelievable strength of mind to say, no, I'm coming back for this.
Well, it's an amazing story, and Will, I'm guessing that that's the story that dominated the press conferences and the news conferences. But obviously, when you look at the selection of the Lions team against the Stormers, something that Tommy mentioned, Stuart Hogg's got an opportunity now to really nail his place in that test side. I guess Robbie Henshaw as well, who everyone has on in their starting team. He's obviously a player who's had a lot of injury problems over the years. Can he put in a performance to warrant test inclusion? And what about the story of Marcus Smith? I mean, twinkle toes himself. Every time he laces his shoes up, something good happens. I mean, it's just been the most incredible story of Marcus Smith, all the way from Harlequins, being near the bottom of the table, right up to now starting at number 10 for the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, in a normal Lions selection day, the fact that a guy who found out a week ago, or 5 days ago now, when we're speaking, that he was going to be on the Lions tour when he left the field playing for England, would be an absolutely incredible story. As it is, the tour captain's on the bench when he was ruled out 3 weeks ago, so it's kind of a bit of a footnote. But the Smith story is incredible. He's 22, and over the last... include this weekend, he's going to play for the Lions. He's played his first 2 England caps over the last 2 weekends, and the 2 weekends before that, he won Harlequins for the Premiership final and the semi-final with 2 of the most outrageous fly-half performances people can remember. So it is remarkable. I can't wait to see him play for the Lions. And actually, it's quite interesting, that number 10 jersey, because Finn Russell Smith is there as cover for Finn Russell, like for like. Dan Biggar was pulled out of last night's game at the last minute with an injury. He's not reappearing on Saturday. And Owen Farrell has also been carrying a little bit of an injury as well. And as Ben said before, he put in a slightly concerning performance possibly last night. So I think that Lions 10 jersey is really open. I think Biggar's probably leading the way to start, but there's a lot of options.
The other thing is, he's orchestrated 2 of the biggest comebacks in Premiership history in his last 2 weekends. So if you're chasing the game against South Africa, who are notoriously difficult to chase the game against, if South Africa are out in front, it's very, very difficult to break things up. Would you have someone like that on the bench that is renowned for getting his team that look dead and buried back into things? So if he has like Will said, a couple of injuries, if he has a good game, that must be a consideration, not necessarily for the first or even the second test, but comes down to it in the third test, he could well feature in this.
Weirdly, I actually think those two players, Alan Wynne-Jones and Marcus Smith, might be linked in terms of selection. So Alan Wynne-Jones might be a bit of a doubt going into that first test. If he does play, will they have a 6-2 bench so they can carry an extra lock? And if they have a 6-2 bench, can they afford a specialist fly half on bench? Probably not. I reckon if they have 6-2, you're looking at someone like Elliot Daly, maybe Stuart Hogg, who's a flexible player. So yeah, it's quite interesting that. I suspect that if Alan Wynne does end up playing, then it'll be, they will use a 6-2 bench.
Sorry, Lawrence, I don't mean to cut you off. I wonder in my head with, I'm absolutely gutted for Finn. I would have loved to have seen Finn had more of a showing on this tour already. I'm a massive fan of his and what he brings to the field. Having played with him and watching him, he's such an exciting player to watch. He can really unlock a defence because you never know as a defence what he's going to do, and he's got the skill set to back it up. So there's a like-for-like thing, which has already been alluded to, but I also think that in the back of Warren's mind, he'll be thinking about confidence. And as you've rightly said, with the semi-final and the final and the comeback and the performances that Marcus Smith has shown over the last few weeks, he'll be aware of the confidence right now flowing through his veins, and he'll be thinking as a kid and what he's done in recent weeks, that if you put him on a field with that confidence levels, knowing what he's just achieved already back home on home soil, there'll be no fear factor with him. He'll be thinking he can go onto that field and make magic happen because he's shown it already, and he'll know that, and he'll have that self-belief to back it up.
And Tommy, just on a little word for Stuart Hogg, who obviously gets his opportunity at fullback. He's a player that you know a huge amount about. I guess that it's sort of hand in hand with the selection on the wings as well, because that back three pendulum is really, really important. But do you see this as an opportunity for him to really nail down that stuff? Because let's be honest, there's a few people that have put their hand up already, including Anthony Watson and Liam Williams as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, Hoggy be the first one to give praise to his competition in that spot with Anthony and Liam, the unbelievable 15s themselves. But I can't wait to see Hoggy out there. I'm really excited to see him back on the field. He arrived on tour a little bit later due to the Exeter finish to the season. He's unfortunately not be able to be involved as much as I know, personally he would have liked. But everyone that watches rugby and has watched rugby the last number of years knows what Stuart Hogg brings to a rugby field. He is absolutely electric. He's got an absolute cannon of a boot, which will be important in combating the South African kicking game as well. He leads as well from Scotland from the back as well. So from a communication point of view, from a leadership point of view, he adds a great deal from the back. He gives assurance to the players around him in that role. And we're going to need to beat South Africa, through scoring tries. And not only does he assist in that way by playing the dual receiver on both sides of the ruck, but he can score them himself from miles out with the speed and the ability he's got in his feet. So, I'm really hoping that Hoggy gets on the field on the weekend and cuts loose and plays the way he can.
I want to use our little segment of outstanding time for us all to pick out a player who we think will make the biggest impact, or we're looking forward to making a big impact in this next Lions match, which of course is against the DHL Stormers on Saturday. Ben, if I can put you on the spot first, maybe up front, although you can pick it back if you want to, but who is your kind of one to watch this weekend, given everything that's happened in selection so far?
Well, I think I saw today that this is the sixth different front row combination that we're going to see. And I think before the tour started, we all thought that nailed on for tight head was Tyke Furlong. I think Sutherland's been brilliant. And now is the time. There's certain combinations on the field where you have to get them playing regularly together, and front row's one of those. So I think Warren is potentially thinking this is starting front row for the Test series. And as a result, Luke Cowan-Dickie is the man in the middle. Now, Luke Cowan-Dickie had got the England shirt ahead of Jamie George. It leapfrogged ahead of him, though. Jamie George came back in, played really, really well. Ken Owens has obviously had a fantastic Six Nations and is playing well. But I just wonder if he's starting to play the front rows as a unit together now. And as a result, is he thinking in his mind that this could be the first Test? But I don't think it's a given. And as a result, I think Warren will be saying to Luke Cowan-Dickie, you have to go out and perform. And he's capable of doing that. He's a such a direct player and the sort of player you need against South Africa, particularly early on, and then you can bring perhaps a more open hooker off the bench once the fatigue set in and once you've at least matched that physical battle. So I think Luke Cowan-Dickie is playing for his test spot, but he's in and around people that potentially could be alongside him in the first test.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Will, who have you got your eye on? Is it someone in the back line, or are you looking up front as well?
We've just been talking about him, but Stuart Hogg, there's another reason I'm really looking forward to watching him. It's not because he's joined the team late from Johannesburg because of the isolation issue. That guy's had no luck on Lions tours. It's been so unfortunate. He went as the youngest player in 2013. He was carrying around that Lion, and it just didn't quite happen for him. And he got injured in 2017. He's been one of the most, consistently outstanding players in the British Isles for the last decade, basically, but getting on for a decade. And I just feel he deserves, a bit of luck to wear that jersey in a test match as well. So I really hope he has a great game. I think it says a lot about the standing he's held in, that actually on this tour, I think this is only his second game. He's been captain for both of them. And they must, Warren Gatland clearly really rates him as a leader. He's been a good leader for Scotland. Tommy will know a bit more about that than I will. But I just really hope he goes well this weekend, that he can stay injury-free and that he can have a look at getting in that 23, because I think he deserves it.
And from my perspective, obviously excited to see Hamish Watson have another run. I thought Tom Curry, even in a losing side, was outstanding and has definitely asked the question of the selectors. But I'm also looking at that centre combination, Robbie Henshaw and Elliot Daly. I think, I've known Elliot Daly for a long time. I still believe 13 is his best position. Many might disagree with that, but obviously Henshaw, I think if he has a big game, then I think he asks the question of the selectors. And Tommy, for you, we've got Van der Merwe on one wing, Josh Adams on the other. You mentioned Anthony Watson and Williams as well, throwing their hat in the ring. Who are you really looking forward to seeing play on Saturday?
Yeah, we've mentioned a couple of names that I was looking forward to. Just I think as much through lack of opportunity thus far for them in Hoggy and Henshaw. Certainly Robbie Henshaw for me is one that I'm really keen to watch what he'll bring. He had an outstanding Six Nations, and I'm looking forward to watching him cut loose on Saturday. In terms of the winger spots, we've already alluded to on many occasions that look, they're all playing really, really well. One of the things, funny enough, I was impressed with most, in the game last night was actually, something he not be particularly happy with, because I know will be hard on himself, is Louis Rees Samet when he was covering across on that breakaway try in the first half. The gas and the effort he showed to get there, to even put himself in a position to make that tackle, was absolutely outstanding. For such a young kid, you can see the drive with them all to push themselves. Van der Merwe and Adams, devastating, both of them, for different reasons. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they both picked up a try apiece, if not more. I'm going to go with Josh Adams at the moment. I just, as much about just keenness to see how many tries he can rack up on this tour. So I'm hoping he gets across the whitewash a couple of times and gets into double digits.
Well, thanks, gents. That's it for this episode. It just remains for me to say an enormous thank you to this week's special guest, Tommy Seymour, and of course to Ben Kay and Will McPherson. Thank you all for joining us. And next time, I'll obviously try and be there in person for a pint. Thanks for listening. And if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like it, subscribe, and let all your friends know about it. Thank you very much indeed. See you next time.